So the one awkward moment, I know you're nervous. I'll have you look in the camera, say your name, your title, and how long you've been in your position, or how long you've been
Okay.
in your career.
All right. Do I come across as nervous?
Extremely. You're sweating like crazy.
Am I sweating? Am I sweating?
Hey, my name is Alex, and welcome to The How. I interview people about their career and ask them all the questions that I figure someone would want to know the answer to in order to choose if that is the right career path for them. And today, you get to learn from a professional news reporter. I've included timestamps below, that way you can navigate to the parts of this interview that are most helpful to you. So settle in, I hope this helps you in your journey, and let's get to it.
My name is Dan Rascon. I'm an anchor and reporter for KSL TV. I've been in the news business for nearly 30 years. And I love doing what I do. I love getting out, meeting people, interacting with people, and telling people stories. That's what I love to do, and that's why I'm in this business. You know, a lot of people grow up wanting to be able to do something in their career that they end up in. I was never one of those guys. I never knew what I wanted to do. I didn't grow up and see somebody on the news and say, that's what I want to do. My older brother did, though. His Art Rascon, he's a newscaster right now. He's an anchor in Houston. He always wanted to be a reporter. And since day one, I think he always had dreams of being a reporter. But I never had those kind of dreams. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. I went off and I started my college career. I went into general education. And I just started taking classes, and I just couldn't find anything that I really liked. And then suddenly my brother was in the business, Art Rascon, 4.5 years older, says, hey, Dan, why don't you try some communication classes? Try some journalism classes, see what you think, see how it is. So I was in my second year of school at college, and I decided to try some journalism classes. And the minute I started them, I just fell in love with it. I don't know what it was like something just clicked. It was like, whoa. This is fun. I like this. I love this. I love being able to get a camera, get it out in the field, interview people, talk to people, and then come back and put the story together. And everybody has a different story, and there's different elements. And I just love the whole, and suddenly college came alive to me. You know, it was like, whoa, this is fun and this is good. And I started doing really well in college. And it was almost like a light went on, and it was like, this is what I need to do. And so that's kind of how it came about with me. It was never one of those things where I grew up always wanting to be a newscaster or reporter, or I watched the news all the time. I was never necessarily a news junkie. I was never, I didn't not watch the news or anything like that, but I just wasn't into it like my brother was. But he's the one, really, he was my inspiration to getting me in the news business. And then I just kind of took off from there. I would say basically that being a TV news personality or being on TV news, anchoring or reporting is not anything like being in Hollywood or being an actor or anything like that. I mean, there are performances you do in front of the camera, obviously. You want to be able to project yourself. You want to be able to be animated, and you want to be able to use your voice to be able to attract attention to your story and everything like that. But it's a whole different delivery system. You know, we are not actors in the sense of trying to portray something that is not really there. We're trying to give facts. We're trying to give the story as to what is happening. We're trying to inform. We're trying to educate. We're trying to uplift. We're trying to edify. These are all elements that we use to be able to try and capture the viewer's attention. And so really, what it takes to be able to do something like that is you've got to be able to think quickly and be able to process and write stories very quickly. Nobody writes my script for me. I don't have anybody writing all my stuff, telling me what to say, telling me what to do. There are occasions when I anchor the news or when I do stories where there may be a producer involved that may write something. But for the most part, day in, day out, Monday through Friday, if I'm reporting, I'm writing my own stuff. I'm doing my own stories. I'll have somebody that checks it, but it's pretty much, I do my own interviews with the photographer, I write my own stories, and I do the whole process on my own, and then I'll have somebody look at it before it airs. But there's a lot of elements involved in writing, in doing the photography, and also editing in order to make airtime. So typical day again for me is getting the news assignment, going forth with the story, whatever the story is, getting the interviews, and then logging the video, and then writing it, and then getting it on there. That's pretty much the process. So there's really 3 different positions in the business, where you have the early morning guys. You know, they'll get up and start their day about 3 a.m. or so, and they work through the noon show. You know, they're off about 1. The day shift is more of a 9 to kind of a 6:30 shift, 7 o'clock shift, and then the night shift is about a 2:30 to 10:30, 11 o'clock shift. So those are the different shifts. And so my schedule right now is I work a Saturday through Wednesday shift. Saturday and Sunday I work, I anchor the 5 and 10 o'clock show on KSL TV. So I work pretty much from 2:30 to 11:30, 11 o'clock at night on Saturdays and Sundays. On Mondays, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I work pretty much a day shift. So I work the 5 and the 6 o'clock show. So typical day for a reporter, we check in and have our morning meeting with producers and everything else, and we kind of just plan the day. We figure out what's the news of the day, what's happening, what are we going to cover, what are we going to go after. And then from there, we pretty much get our assignments, and then I get a photographer, and then I just start hitting the pavement. I start making calls, I start figuring out how am I going to tell this story, how am I going to do this story, and then we kind of put the story all together. And then I write it, I voice it, and then I give it to the photographer, who is also the editor. He edits it, and it gets on air on 5 and 6 o'clock that night. So there's a lot of deadline pressure because you're always up against the clock, and it doesn't stop. And so you're trying to get that story on for the 5 and 6 o'clock news. And then once it's on, tomorrow, the next day is another day, you know. So that's pretty much my daily routine. Now, as far as anchoring goes, I'll get in about 2:30 or so. We have a 4:30 show, and I'll look through scripts, and I'll help maybe the producer write scripts, I'll edit scripts. I'll go through that whole thing, and then the show starts at 4:30 and we're on air. We do the newscast, and then after it's over, then I prepare for the 10 o'clock show, and then we have that. I get home about 11:15 at night. So that's pretty much my routine on a weekly basis.
Busy.
So yeah, that's why I like to move. That's why I like to get out and about, because I'm not a person that likes to sit a lot. And so that's why I love the business, doing what I do. People don't realize there's a lot of things that go into putting a story together, and one of them includes holidays. This is a business where the news never stops. The news goes on 24/7, 365 days a year. There are no holidays in the news. There's news on Christmas Day. There's news on Thanksgiving Day. There's news on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. And there's news on the weekends. And so it never stops. And so if you're interested in having those days off, your holidays and your weekends and everything else like that, this is not the business to get into, because you'll work holidays, you'll work weekends. I mean, once you have more seniority, you're able to choose your days. It just depends on how long you've been in the business. So. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to begin in this business, but bottom line is, anymore, get an education. I mean, a bachelor's degree. I mean, I got a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism. So broadcast journalism, you need some hands-on experience. I mean, you could go and get an English degree or some other degree in something else, and then also become a broadcaster. But having that broadcast journalism degree puts you in classes and get you hands-on experience. Because really, when all is said and done, when you try to get a job, it's pretty much, I mean, they don't necessarily use tapes anymore like we used to, but let me see your tape, or let me see your reel back in the good old days. Basically, let me see what you can do on camera. Let me see what your story looks like. Let me see how you project yourself. I want to see your face. I want to hear your voice. I want to hear your storytelling. Your resume tape, or your paper resume, could be great. You know, it could be amazing, and you can have all these things. But if you don't know how to tell a story, and if you don't know how to project your voice, or you carry your voice, or basically do a story, it's going to be very difficult to get a job. And so it's really a combination of being able to have the hands-on experience and also being able to have, you know, the book smarts too, to be able to put the stories together and know how to do it. And so there's several different avenues. You could start as, I mean, if you want to be a reporter or you want to be an anchor, you really have to start in that right away. That gives you a better start. You may have to be in a really small market, go off to a small market, work a small market for a little while, and then work your way up. There are those who go into bigger markets and they may be a producer, or they may be an assignment editor or a news editor, kind of behind the scenes at first. But those avenues take a little bit longer because you've got to produce for a while, because most of the time you'll produce for 1 or 2 years or so before you get a chance to maybe show some on-air experience. Whereas if you graduate and you go off as a reporter in a smaller market, you're working as a professional reporter. You're on air every day. And that's much more likely to get you a job in a higher market down the road. So you start in a smaller market, a couple of years later you can move your way up, and then a couple of years after that you can move your way up. And so that's usually the best way to get a job in the business, is to go out after you graduate as an actual reporter or an anchor in a smaller market, and then kind of work your way up. The pay range is very low in this business as far as when you first start. I mean, I remember when I graduated, I would make more at working at McDonald's than I would as a reporter. So that's why a lot of people, it's tough, you know, starting off, because you're basically making just a little bit more maybe than minimum wage. So when I started off, I made $20,000 a year. That was it. You know, here I was married at the time, and we had a kid already. And so it was one of those things where $20,000 a year is not a lot, especially back in, you know, I mean, it was 1991 when I graduated. And then I got a raise up to like $30,000. Then I went up to $60,000. So you can eventually get over $100,000, obviously, in this business. You can get a six-figure salary. But, you know, the thing about it is it takes some time. Most of the jobs being offered out there right now, you're going to make probably $20 an hour or so, you know, getting from graduating out in the field. I mean, it's been a long time, obviously, since I've worked, you know, coming out of school. I mean, that was back in 1991. But the graduates that I've talked to right now, they are getting jobs, but they're not paying a whole lot. But you can eventually make more money as you get into bigger markets, you know, those kind of things. So there's money to be made, but it takes a little while to make that money. Because, but then, you know, but then there are those that are making very good money in big markets. And if you go off and you're a national correspondent or you're a national anchor, you know, then you could make really good money. But those are the ones that are very rare. I mean, you get the ones in the national news that can make millions a year, but they're very, you know, far and few between, you know. But you're no engineer, you're not coming out of school making $60,000, $70,000 a year. You know, that just is unheard of. What I enjoy most about the work is every day is different. Every day is a new thing. Every day you're doing something completely different than you did maybe yesterday. You're meeting new people, you're talking to new people, you're interviewing new people, and you're writing a story that is due that day. That's what I love about the business, is actually, in some ways, the deadline pressure wears on you, but in some ways the deadline pressure is fun, because the deadline pressure makes you thrive more, as far as you just go after it more. And you know you have that deadline to put the story together, so the clock is always ticking. You can't just say, oh, I'll put this off and I'll wait till tomorrow, kind of thing. Every day you're working against that clock. And so to me, that's kind of fun, to be able to have that deadline pressure in some ways. But the newness of every day is fun for me, is that you're always doing something different. You're always meeting somebody different, and you're always have a chance to be able to tell a different story. And then the process of putting that story together and then seeing it on air that night is very fulfilling. It's almost like you've got your project you were told in the morning, and by that night it's done and it's on air and it's for everyone to see. And hopefully it turned out well. And when it does turn out well, then it's very fulfilling to be able to see that what you did, because in many ways you've just maybe educated or uplifted, or you've edified somebody or the viewers in some way by showcasing your story. Well, the funny thing is, one of the most difficult things is also one of the most satisfying things, and that's the deadline pressure, because that can wear on you very, a lot. I mean, that can basically wear you out as far as a constant deadline pressure to be able to get that project done and on air. And sometimes you don't get the interviews you want. Sometimes you don't get the story you want. But yet you still have to come up with the story. You still have to have the story and put it on air. And so that is one of the most difficult things too, as far as just being able to get that story on air, and that can be very wearing. The other thing is, a lot of people get burned out in the business because of the fact of being able to hitting the pavement day after day, of trying to be able to get those stories that are out there. There's a lot of talk, of course, nowadays with the whole fake news kind of thing. And, I've always tried to be very honest and have a lot of integrity and when it comes to news writing, because you can ruin somebody's life overnight. I mean, this is serious business. The news business is serious business, where if you make mistakes, you can ruin a business overnight or somebody's life overnight. And so you have to be very careful that you have your facts accurate and you're saying what you need to say, and it's backed up. That you can't just go on air and sensationalize things. I mean, there's headlines that we use to grab people's attention and those kind of things. But when all is said and done, the story has to be accurate, it has to be right, and it has to be done right. And so those kind of pressures can also wear on you. That's very difficult. I mean, it's very difficult because you're up against that time clock to get that story on air. But you have to make sure that story is right and accurate, and so that can be wearing on you too. What's funny is, ever since I've been in this business for nearly 30 years, but ever since I've been in this business, started in this business, they've always said that TV news is a dying breed. It's going to eventually go out. But here I am, nearly 30 years into it, and TV news is still thriving. I mean, people still turn to TV news to see what's going on. Obviously, when they turn to social media, they can turn to that too. So we now also have to be very vigilant in social media. It's a different day for news reporters, because we've got to be tweeting, we've got to be posting things constantly on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to make sure that we're getting our message out there, because that's how people are gathering the news. And so 5-10 years down the road, yes, TV news may not be as attractive maybe as it is now, but I don't believe that TV news is going to die off. I mean, they've been telling me that now for 30 years, that it's going to die off. But I think people are going to still turn to it, because it's still going to be a source of information that people need. A quick, easy source that they can turn to for answers when there's breaking news or developing news and those kind of things. So I think the future of TV news still looks good. I think it still looks positive. But you always have all those other avenues coming in, social media and all the other TV stations that are going to affect that. But I believe that, that we'll still survive. I feel like I'm accomplishing something every day, I guess. It's almost like I said, it's like you start a project and you get to see it on air that night. And it's kind of fulfilling to be able to say, wow, I did that. And I put that together and I helped create that. And it's almost like, to me, like a mini documentary you're putting on air every night. And that, to me, is very fulfilling. So it's a fulfillment of, wow, I did that. I started it from scratch and I finished it, and you could see the end product quickly. But the other thing too is, I love being able to meet people from all different walks of life. It's so fun to be able to get people and talk to people that are dealing with all different types of circumstances. And unfortunately, a lot of the news today is sad and very tragic. And unfortunately, I do a lot of those type of stories where innocent women, men, and children are killed in some way or another, or some accident happens or something happens. And you know, unfortunately, those are very difficult stories to tell. And you're knocking on doors of family that lost loved ones, and that's very challenging. Some people though want to talk about it, and some don't, and I understand that. And you have to be very sensitive. But having a chance to be able to sit in somebody's living room and get their perspective on what happened in their life or what happened in their situation, for me is very fulfilling, because I'm learning something every day. I'm learning something new every day. I'm learning how this industry works, or that profession works, or that person is dealing with this kind of tragic situation in their life. I learn from that, and I'm able to pick up something from that, and that's what's really enjoyable for me, is to be able to meet people from all walks of life, from people who are, you know, very important, you know, as they call them, masters of industry, to people who are just your ordinary ma and pas that are on the streets, you know, dealing with just everyday life, you know. And so you meet people from all different walks of life, and that's very fulfilling. The biggest advice I give anybody who wants to get into the broadcast journalism business is basically get as much hands-on experience as you can. I mean, if you're going to college, get involved in any kind of journalism, writing. If you're wanting to get into TV news of it, you know, get a camera and start interviewing people and doing things where you're telling people's stories. So get as much hands-on experience as you can get. Go do internships or go hang out at TV stations. You know, just being able to be around it and learn the lingo and learn what the process is, and talk to people and watch the news. Watch news coverage. Watch as much as you can and see the different reporters and see the different styles and how do they do this, how do they do that. And then maybe get a chance to talk to most local news reporters are more than willing to talk to graduates or college students. That's not a problem. I mean, you give them a call, they'll more than likely give you a call back or talk to you about, you know, the product or look at your videos or your stories. So just get as much hands-on experience as you can. The other thing too is your creativity. Just try and be as creative as you can as far as trying to tell a story. Realize if you're going into the TV industry, realize that TV news is much different than radio news or print news. The way I approach a story is totally different than a radio news reporter or a print reporter. They handle their stories differently because I'm thinking video. My story is video driven. And so the way I do the interviews, the way I present my story is all through video. And so a lot of times people think, oh, a story is a story. No, it's completely different. Just realize that if you're going to the TV industry, it's got to be video driven. You've got to be able to capture people's emotions through camera, your feelings. You got to be able to capture video and what's happening. You got to get people doing things and interacting. It's very visual driven. And so that's the way I approach stories all the time. So that's something that I would give people. Obviously get an education, but get as much hands-on experience as you can, and then make sure you're very creative and realize that if you're going into TV journalism is much different, and you want to approach it much differently and look for visuals to tell your story. Being a family man has made me a much better reporter, I believe, because if you have kids of your own and you're struggling with your own family and you're dealing with your own challenges in your own family life and you're raising kids and you're doing all those kind of things, that gives you a whole new perspective when you're covering stories about education, about raising kids or doing anything with kids, or even if you're covering a tragic situation involving kids. You just have a whole different perspective, on that kind of thing. I'm not saying that you have to be a family man to be a great reporter, but I believe that being a family man has really put a news perspective on me when it comes to covering news. It's put a different perspective on me as far as the way I see stories and the way I tell stories. Having raised kids and doing all that, it puts a whole nother perspective on what people may be going through in their life.
If you thought this video was helpful at all, I would appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment. Let me know what I could do more of or change. That way these videos are more helpful to you and others in the future. Here you can see Dan Rascon's personality type. That way you can learn more about him and also help you decide if his career path is actually a good fit for you or not. And if you haven't already taken the personality quiz, here you can do so. If you have a similar personality type to him, you may also enjoy being a news reporter. And most of all, consider subscribing. That way you can stay up to speed with the latest videos and learn how to find the right career path for you.